The taxi screeched to a halt just shy of the gravel driveway I hadn't seen in over a year. I stepped out, boots still gritty with Afghan dust, my uniform crisp, expecting to surprise my mom with an early homecoming and collapse into my own bed for the first time in 11 months. But where my cozy white cottage with green shutters and a porch swing once stood, there was a dog park. A fenced-in barking chaos of a dog park. Two Labradors chased a tennis ball across what used to be my living room. A woman in leggings shot me a dirty look as she yanked her spaniel away from my duffel bag. I thought I'd gotten the address wrong until I saw the oak tree I'd carved my initials into before deploying. Its scarred trunk stood defiant in what was still my yard, except my yard was gone. A sign read Cedar Grove Community Park sponsored by the Homeowners Association. A plaque below it gushed about harmony and shared J, a Y.my heart thumped louder than mortar fire. When I asked a jogger what happened to the house, he shrugged and said some deadbeat hadn't paid taxes, so the HOA repurposed the land. He jogged off, oblivious that I was the so-called deadbeat. Something inside me cracked. Not anger, not grief, but a bone-deep disbelief laced with exhaustion. I'd survived ambushes, led night patrols, and pulled kids from burning huts. But here, the enemy wore athleisure and wielded clipboards that I spent hours ping-ponging between city offices, each clerk more clueless than the last. Property records claimed I'd lost my land 6 months ago for tax delinquency, except I'd filed a military tax exemption before leaving. One clerk, barely looking up, told me to talk to the HOA's president, Susan Whitaker. She was apparently very committed to neighborhood standards that I found her in the community clubhouse perched like a queen on a throne of self-awarded plaques. A framed photo labeled Visionary Leader hung behind her. She was berating a kid for putting up a basketball hoop when I walked in. I cleared my throat and introduced myself as the owner of 214 Pine Lane. Her eyes flicked up and she smirked, a smug, practiced twist of the lips. Flipping through a folder, she said that lot was delinquent, unclaimed, and reassigned to the HOA per protocol. When I mentioned my active duty status and federal exemption, she cut me off. Maybe you should have considered your obligations before running off to play soldier. The room went silent, her words hanging like smoke. I cited federal law protecting deployed service members from property loss. She offered me a lot by the trash compactor, cooing, "We can work something out, honey," like she was tossing me scraps. I left. Her smirk burned into my brain. That night, I checked into a motel, staring at the ceiling, my body home, but my mind still at war. This wasn't Afghanistan. It was dirtier. Fought on my own soil against neighbors I'd bled to protect. By morning, I called Javier Morales, a buddy from my unit now working cyber ops for a federal agency. I'd saved his life in a firefight he owed me. Within hours, he unearthed a tangle of forged deeds, backdated HOA minutes, and land deals tied to Susan's brother-in-law. The HOA had faked a paper trail claiming my land was abandoned. Javier found emails where Susan bragged about flipping that grunt's lot and keeping the neighborhood soldier-free. One message joked, "I'd salute and slink off if he ever returned." Rage simmered. Not the kind that explodes, but the kind that sharpens focus. A lawsuit would take years, and Susan had lawyers on speed dial. I needed something sharper, louder, undeniable that I remembered Colonel Marcus Reed, who told me to call if I ever needed help stateside. When I explained how the HOA stole my home while I was deployed, his voice went steel cold. "Send me the coordinates and a list of their assets. Quiet or loud?" I chose loud. The plan took shape. I didn't want an apology or a check. I wanted the HOA to feel what it's like to have their world upended. Javier spent nights digging, building a dossier thick enough to choke a bureaucrat. He found records of the HOA claiming adverse possession, forging my signature, and selling my land to a shell company run by Susan's kin. Satellite images showed illegal expansions, fences, sidewalks, even a clubhouse built on protected wetlands. Susan's emails mocked veterans as troublemakers and called my house a shack. Next, I met Judge Clara Hensley at the courthouse. A former JAG officer, She knew my unit and despised civilian scams against soldiers. I laid out Javier's evidence, forged documents, zoning violations, emails. She called it a criminal masterpiece and warned that despite the proof, the HOA's money and connections could stall a lawsuit for years. When I asked about federal seizure for investigation, her eyes gleamed. If it's tied to public service abuse or security, she said, it's possible. I left and called Colonel Reed. He proposed a military training exercise on disputed land, framed as urban conflict readiness. Within a day, he secured approval for Operation Homefront, a weekend-long op by the 212th Tactical Battalion. My lot and surrounding HOA properties would become a simulation zone. It was legal, audacious, and perfect. Susan had no clue her next meeting would be crashed by Humvees. Javier and I mapped every illicit HOA structure, the dog park, clubhouse, even Susan's prized rose garden. Military logistics planned vehicle routes and landing zones. 3 days later, everything was set at dawn. Cedar Grove woke to diesel roars. Humvees rolled past manicured lawns. Soldiers staked tents in the dog park, and a black hawk buzzed the meditation garden. Residents gaped in pajamas, clutching mugs. Susan stormed out in a satin robe, holding a cup that read, Cedar Grove's finest. Her jaw dropped as engineers turned her clubhouse into a command post. She charged an officer, waving her mug like a scepter, but he handed her a packet, federal orders for land investigation and temporary occupation. Her face turned beet red as she screamed about sovereignty. No one cared. I pulled up in an unmarked SUV, watching her spot me. You did this, she hissed, storming over. I nodded. That land you stole? It's mine again, inch by inch. She sputtered, claiming HOA rights. But I asked when she last checked her property lines. She froze. Soldiers cordoned off the clubhouse, pool, and garden, all built on stolen or unpermitted land. Susan tried locking herself in the clubhouse, but the county provided keys. Her wine fridge became a cooler for MREs. Her living room, a map room. Residents panicked, some waving pizza box protest signs, others calling news vans. A few tried challenging the legality, but backed off when shown their own zoning violations. An elderly couple brought me coffee, confessing they'd hated Susan's fines for years. They shared photos of my old house, offering to testify. I thanked them, feeling the tide turn. By noon, media swarmed. Susan's press conference flopped as cameras caught military tape around her precious sign. She ranted about government overreach, but cracked when asked why a veteran's home was razed. Her meltdown aired by evening, going viral with hashtags like hashtag Justice for Esgita Ramirez and hashtag Susan Sinks. Javier traced 5 more fraudulent land deals in the HOA, and Susan's brother-in-law faced IRS probes. A red sign went up, federal training ground, restricted access. Susan's empire was occupied, her petunias trampled by boots. Soldiers drilled past stunned residents. Drones mapped the land, and Susan's kitchen hosted briefings. Checkpoints blocked her allies. Inside the command post, I reviewed documents with a DoD officer, confirming my ownership and the HOA's crimes. They bulldozed my house without permits, paid by Susan's accounts. Out front, Susan tried rallying her board with a megaphone, but neighbors booed. An officer slapped a federal audit notice on her table, dissolving the HOA. Cheers erupted. Reporters mobbed her demanding answers. She babbled legalese, but the narrative was set. She was the villain. I was the avenger. Javier sent the knockout. Leaked footage of Susan mocking soldiers, laughing about my house's destruction, and bragging about untouchable fraud. I sent it to the press with one line, I'm home. It exploded online, sparking calls for her arrest and veteran support. The VA condemned her, and civil rights groups offered legal aid. Susan's allies fled. Her brother-in-law was subpoenaed, and her contractors snitched .11 homes, including hers, faced relocation notices. Residents scrambled, some packing, others crying. Susan's house became a federal review hub. Her files exposed years of embezzlement and shredded complaints. At dusk, I stood where my living room once was. Soldiers had marked the foundation, clearing space to rebuild. I thanked them. Their salutes were heavy with shared stories of homefront betrayals. Judge Hensley dissolved the HOA permanently, stripping Susan's title. She was done, her power, her legacy. Ash. That night, I slept soundly, knowing justice was close. Weeks later, rebuilding began. The VA and donations funded it, aiming to restore my home. Neighbors brought food, contractors, and apologies for past silence. Susan fled town, her car stuffed with boxes, her name a memory. Cedar Grove healed. Kids played freely. Yards bloomed chaotically. A new civic group formed with a Ramirez clause protecting soldiers. I drove the first nail into the porch frame where Mom's swing would hang. The sound was creation, not destruction. They stole my home while I fought for theirs. So I returned, reclaimed it, and dismantled their world. One nail, one truth, one soldier at a time.